In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB. This week we're going to talk to you about the global draft which occurred this past week. I also want to get into a piece that you wrote, JB, called Margin Call, which was a fantastic open letter to the CFL. And we're also going to answer some mailbag questions. It's been a long time since we did a mailbag. We've got a couple of great questions here, and we'll address that in this week's episode. So let's get things started with the global draft. The way that this played out, I don't know if the Argos got their first guy. They say they did, but I think they were always going to say that. Every team always says after the draft, that went so well. We got everybody that we had our eyes on.
Nobody says, "Oh my God, we didn't get the guy we wanted. I don't like the guy we got at all."
Right. It's not like you and I in our fantasy drafts where we're like, "Oh man, I can't believe you took that guy. I was just about to take him." Like you never acknowledge that. So of course the Argos came out and said, "Yeah, we got everyone we wanted. We were really targeting Tiggy Sanko. That was the guy we wanted coming into the draft, and we got him." I don't think you can believe any team when they say that. Now, last year they said the same thing with the traditional CFL draft, but I actually felt that. You really saw it in the videos that were released. You really felt that they did indeed get guys they were targeting. We don't have video of the reactions this year, so I can't really gauge it. I just don't think you can put a lot of stock in any team that says the draft went exactly as they hoped it would. So my personal thought is I can't believe they wouldn't have had eyes on Steve Nielsen from Denmark, the offensive lineman who played 4 years at Eastern Michigan. He was a starter, basically a starter all 4 years. I think he started a couple games into his freshman year. 6'8", 323. He profiles exactly like the kind of offensive lineman that Coach McAdoo loves. Guys that he's really excited about coaching in Toronto already. We've talked extensively about the other four guys we've got who are 6'8". He loves guys with reach like that. And this guy can play. He's a really solid offensive lineman. Edmonton took him in the second overall pick. And so Toronto was left without him on the board. And the guy they took is the guy they say they wanted from the beginning, and maybe they did. I can't say that's not true because he looks like a terrific player. And Tiggy Sanko, defensive back, technically from the United Kingdom. So that's who they got. They say they're excited about it. I'm pretty excited about him as a player too, because he's not like your traditional global player who grew up playing other sports. And like we talked about Asnel Robo, for example, he's a guy that grew up playing soccer. And it wasn't until he saw Reggie Bush in the Super Bowl as a teenager where he's like, hey, I'm going to give football a try. Tiggy Sanko grew up in Baltimore, and he grew up playing football. He even played high school football, and then at the age of 15, moved to England. And so it's a bit of a different global draft pick. Do you think that matters? Do you think playing at a young age is something that might separate him from guys that maybe didn't pick up football until they were a teenager?
Yeah, that's a real. I mean, I know that people are biased to believe that. I don't think so. I'm of the mind that great athletes are able to pick a game up. I mean, to an extent, I think you would have a greater kind of holistic, systematic understanding of football if you've been playing. I think usually guys who have played before are better than guys who haven't. But eventually, the talent comes out. I mean, I think they've shown that. I know New England, drafted a guy who played football for the first time in his senior year of college. But he was an elite rugby player and, played 6-7 years in the NFL. So I don't think necessarily, I think you can teach a good athlete.
I think, see, I'm on the other side of it. I agree with you that you can do it. And I think there are certain positions that work better than others. I believe that as a defensive back, having those extra formative years help mentally. I think being able to understand those introductory processes of the game, breaking down what's happening in front of you, learning to read what's going on as a defensive back, looking at route combinations. I think the more of that you do at an early age, the easier it is for you later to get more complex with it. I don't know. I was happy with the pick because of his film as well. He actually impresses. And he was a guy that has spent the last 2 years with the Cleveland Browns. So his story goes as follows. He ended up in England, played some football pretty much right away. He ended up attending the American Football Academy in Bristol. And then when he was old enough, he played for the London Warriors of the BAFL. And when he was called on to participate in the NFL's International Player Development Program, he flew out to IMG Academy in Florida and he just blew everybody away. So we're talking about 40 time, we're talking about 3-cone, all the typical combine drills, your bench press and everything else. And yeah, the scouts loved him. And so he ended up being assigned as a part of that program to the Cleveland Browns. He spent the last 2 seasons there, so you know he's getting very high level information in terms of his mental, but also reps against NFL players. And his preseason stuff actually looked pretty good. He didn't get a snap in the regular season. He has no official statistics, but when he was on the field, he didn't look out of place. He looked really good. And he's only 24 years old. So this is a player that I think you can actually look to compete this year. I think he's going to be trying to take a roster spot from somebody. I don't know if he's there yet. I don't think so. But I think he's definitely going to turn the heat on. And I think they're probably looking at him as a free safety, possibly in that cover backer role, but I think he's probably going to be more comfortable as a free safety. So I think that's where they're going to end up slotting him in somewhere in on that depth chart, maybe second, maybe third at that free safety spot. So all in all, I think a great first round pick. In the second round, we kind of thought they were going to go kicker or punter. There was a very skilled kicker-punter group, and a lot of people jumped on the fact that this might be the only football draft in history where a punter was taken with the first overall selection of the draft. That just doesn't happen a lot. And there was a run on punters. There were a number of punters taken in the first round, and that left a lot of really skilled kickers. So Toshiki Sato, who is from Japan, a kicker that I had mentioned in my draft preview, a guy that I thought the Argos would probably be targeting, much like I thought with Tiggy Sanko. I thought they might be looking at Takeru Yamasaki, who I think has maybe become more of a viral video sensation than anything else. But he's got an absolute cannon. There are videos of him kicking from 73 and doing all sorts of amazing tricks with his kicks. And I thought that might be something that the Argos would at least want to take a look at. But I think ultimately they're correct in going with Toshiki Sato. He is accurate. He's got a very long leg, but not only does he have that cannon that Yamasaki has, his is game proven. So while Yamasaki's kicks were on videos at practice, just him goofing around, Sato came in and kicked a 58-yard field goal in an X-League game. And that is actually still, to this day, a Japanese football record. So not only that, he's got clutch situation kicks. He hit a 41-yarder to win the East Japan Championship. He had a 50-yarder in the championship game. He's won a ton of games right at the end, in regulation and in overtime. And he was good enough that both the Cowboys and the Raiders brought him in to take a look. They didn't keep him, and I think in watching his film, my thought is that his trajectory looks low. I don't have the special teams experience that you do. I want to know your thought on kicking trajectory. When I watch his kicks, even the shorter ones, they don't have the air under them that you see from a lot of professional kickers. You notice it right off the bat when you watch his videos. They don't take off up. They all take off out. And I wonder if the Cowboys and Raiders might have been concerned about the potential for a block and whether or not that might be something that made them look another direction. How important is it to get height as a field goal kicker?
It's not so much height. It's just simply the speed of the kick. That in essence, if you kick the ball in under 2 seconds, it can never be blocked. So it's really the timing and the ability to get that timing down so quickly so that the instant the ball is snapped down, your foot is making contact with it.
I'm excited about it. I think you look at those first two picks, you've got a guy that can compete for a starting position at free safety. You've got a kicker that can compete with Boris Bede for kicking responsibilities. He can punt too. I didn't see a lot of film of his punting, a little bit. It didn't stand out to me. It just looked like any other punter that I had seen. I'm not a special teams expert, but it wasn't something that jumped off the page for me. But I know he can do both. And so maybe he comes in and gives Boris Bede a push, and at the very least, maybe he's either on the roster or on the practice squad, and a guy that they can turn to if something happens to Bede, if he goes down with an injury. They've got another guy who can fulfill both punting and kicking responsibilities. So we get to the third round. There's no pick for the Argos in the third, but they've got 2 picks in the fourth. At this point, it has thinned down significantly. And when I started looking up and down targets that I had for the fourth round, there just weren't very many guys left. There was a guy that I had my eyes on in guard/tackle, Chris Ferguson from Bermuda. He played with the Cincinnati Bearcats, but he was taken by Ottawa right at the end of the third round, and that really didn't leave a lot. There were a couple guys in the fourth, a couple offensive linemen that I thought maybe the Argos might take a flyer on, guys that just didn't look like they had the speed or the agility, but you never know. There were some really big guys, again, some more of those 6'8" types that McAdoo seems to like. So I thought maybe they'd go that direction, but ultimately they decided to go with 2 lottery tickets. So their first fourth round pick, Max Duffy, a punter who I don't think there's any chance we'll see him play in the CFL. He was the best punter in the NCAA. He won the Ray Guy Award. He averaged 48.1 yards per punt. He's going to be drafted in the NFL draft coming up in a week and a bit. And even if he isn't, even if somehow he doesn't get drafted, he's going to be the first punter that people call as an undrafted free agent. He will be on an NFL roster this year, even if it's just a practice roster. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody brings him in to be their guy at 48.1 yards per punt, winning the Ray Guy. I just don't see any world in which he ends up in the CFL. So is that, in your mind, a good gamble because they, in the fourth round, take a guy who could maybe be the best punter in the CFL? Or is it a waste because he's probably not going to end up here?
No, that's what I believe. I believe the lottery ticket is 100% what you should do with the global draft. To find just another guy, I don't see the upside to that. I think the global draft has found money. If you're able to hit on, I don't look at the global draft as a source of talent. I think you're looking at that as the opportunity to catch lightning in a bottle. And if you do, fantastic. And if you don't, that's fine. I would not be conservative with the global draft at all. I like that. I like that move. I think that makes the most sense to do. To really hope that you hit it, and if you don't, who cares?
And their second fourth round pick is pretty much the same thing. But not only did they take a guy that would be drafted in the NFL, they took a guy who had actually just signed an NFL contract 2 days earlier in Sam Reyes out of Chile. He's a tight end. I guess in the CFL, he would be a wide receiver. We don't really do the tight end thing. He would be an inside guy the way that you saw Rodney Smith in 2019. He'd sort of play that R or Y position depending on how you name it. So he signed with the Washington football team 2 days before the global draft because he blew people away at his combine. He's 6'5", 260. He's got a 40-inch vertical. His 4.65 is impressive, but it doesn't stand out like a Kyle Pitts or something like that. But still, 4.65 for a 260-pound man is excellent. And with that 40-inch vertical to go along with it, it's pretty good. Now, the weird thing is that he just hasn't played football. He was at Tulane for basketball, decided he would, instead of playing another season of basketball at Tulane, he decided he would go to Florida and train specifically to be a tight end, with the goal of making the NFL. And that's exactly what happened. He spent a year training in Florida, basically becoming a football tight end, and Washington decided he was worth a gamble. They signed him to a contract. So I can't see him coming to the CFL anytime soon. Not saying never, but if he does end up in the CFL, I can't see it being over the next couple of years. That doesn't mean it's not worth it, though.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Honestly, I think a conservative view of who to pick is really a waste of time. I think that you take one or two guys that you think you have a decent shot of, and everybody else is a prayer.
The other thing too is that neither of these guys are in situations where it would be shocking if they ended up not making it in the NFL. You got Max Duffy, who's a punter, and you just never know. There's only 32 jobs that exist. Teams don't typically carry a number of punters on their roster. You might have one on the practice squad, but it's not like you've got a team that's carrying 5 or 6 punters. So that could be something where there just simply isn't availability. Maybe he gets picked up by a team whose incumbent punter wins the job easily. Maybe everyone else is settled to that position and nobody signs him. And maybe he comes up here and maybe it's only for a year or two, but then suddenly there's your 4th round pick who might be the best punter in the CFL. And the same thing with Reyes. He's a guy that's never played football before, really, at any sort of level. And so would it be shocking if he doesn't make an NFL team after spending his whole life as a basketball player? No, it wouldn't. So those are both lottery picks that I really like. And I know I graded the Argos draft as being an A-, and I got a bit of criticism for that. People saying, well, how can you grade it an A- when both of their 4th round picks, their 3rd and 4th selection, are guys that probably will never play in the league? And my defense to that is that anyone else they would have taken in that round probably wasn't going to play in the league. There just weren't guys. When you looked up and down the players left, there was no one that I saw making the Argonauts roster, in which case, absolutely the correct thing to do is take a flyer on Max Duffy and on Reyes and see what happens.
Yeah, I think there's a decent chance we get the punter. I really do. I mean, I think, generally punters don't have coaches pulling for them, where, maybe a kid who might be a tight end might have a coach kind of pulling to make it happen. So punters are expendable. And, I think it's highly possible that, I mean, I guess that's the question. Would you rather play in the CFL than an NFL practice squad? That is true. I mean, he may just end up on the practice squad, but I think there's at least, a 25-30% chance he ends up in the CFL. That's good enough.
All right, let's move on. So you wrote a piece this week that just caught fire. It went really well. It got a huge number of reads and a lot of comments. We received a number of emails about the piece. Essentially, it's you writing an open letter to the CFL, maybe without spoiling it for those that haven't had a chance to read it yet. Can you tell us where it came from? What inspired you to write an open letter to the CFL?
Well, it came from my frustration, which I have certainly vented from time to time on here, at how the CFL is treating its fans and its players. I understand we're in the middle of a pandemic and that, the world, especially in Ontario and now in British Columbia, is getting turned upside down. However, that does not mean that the CFL is then free to pretend like it exists in a vacuum or that it doesn't owe some responsibility to its players and to its fans. I think that it has treated both very poorly by last year dragging it out, then canceling, and now this year keeping everybody in the dark. Every other professional league in the world has found a way to adapt and to play. And so my question to the CFL is, among others, is why haven't you? Who are you pointing to? Who else has not been able, a year later, to figure out a way to connect with the fans, to make a new arrangement with your players, and to just, in essence, to keep the league alive. Um, Everything I feel, I feel like the people running the league are really kind of tired of being in the CFL business. I don't know what else to read from it but that. I think if we now a year and a half into this and we haven't gotten any update or schedule or timeline, I think it's offensive. And that kind of frustration at that attitude that we are not deserving of information is what fueled that letter. Because where are they? How do you not have a timeline? I'm not suggesting things can't change, but we are now into the end of April and no one has been told anything. The commissioner gets out and sort of says nothing, and they went looking for money and of course were told no, as they should have been, because they're a business and not somebody who needs a free loan from the government. But for there to be no communication with the players and no communication with the fans is, disgraceful. And I think potentially, as I mentioned last year, potentially very damaging. I mean, even the NFL, which is King Kong, understood the importance of communicating with fans and being transparent as much as possible about the hope to get things going. And the CFL, who, is not even Donkey Kong, is acting like they don't answer to anybody. And it's disgraceful.
If you haven't checked it out yet, it's called Margin Call. You can find it at xsandargos.com. A fantastic read. It's going to make you fired up. So be ready for it. But a ton of positive response from that piece. So yeah, you definitely should check it out on xsandargos.com. All right, JB, it's that time. Let's get to the mailbag.
Yeah, love it.
The first one comes from A. Chan. The question is, do you think the CFL would be able to play even a shortened season without fans to get a Grey Cup game and all of the bonuses and TV money that come with that? So maybe I'll take a stab at it first and you can tell me how I'm wrong. I don't think when we talk about the tons of money and bonuses that come with it, I don't think that exists the same way that we think about it when we think of any other kind of sports league. The idea of having a Grey Cup game, of having playoff games, these aren't massive revenue generators for the league. It helps, obviously. Ratings in a playoff game, ratings in a Grey Cup, these are traditions, these are great things. I don't think it's going to help offset the cost for the teams that aren't in the Grey Cup. This is not something where a team that has to play a shortened season and has 5 games where no fans are allowed in the stands and they go 0-5, that's not going to make a lick of difference for them. And so I think the call ultimately has to be, are we fine with playing and losing money? And if not, then we can't play. I think that's what it's going to come down to. I don't think the idea of the Grey Cup looming in the background, I don't think that's this huge bag of cash that they're just trying to get to. I wish that were the case, because I think there'd be some more incentive then to get something down and to get playing. But I think this is probably going to be a losing season in terms of the financial status for all 9 teams in the league, no matter what happens.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality that many of the teams in the league are essentially run at a loss to continue the league. And unfortunately, this has kind of put a real spotlight on that there's not much financial motivation to actually run the league. And that has resulted in where we are right now, is that it's not like the NFL where there are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. There are really only losses at stake. So, I wish the CFL could garner some money from these playoff games. But I think you're right. I think that the Grey Cup is not Even though it's a big deal for the city that has it, it's just not a financial draw to the owners, to at least not enough to try and run a season.
The next question we have comes from Mary, and she asks, how do you evaluate players in European leagues and the Arena League for their CFL potential? So this is something that I'm getting better at. It's still not easy. And I still will watch films sometimes and think, I just don't know what I'm looking at, because either the game they're playing is just too different, or the league they're playing in is just, it's sort of hard to quantify the difference in skill. I will say that I'm definitely getting better at evaluating the caliber of athlete we're talking about. When you watch some of those games, especially preparing for the global draft, which is I think what Mary's talking about here, watching the X League, watching the German League, the British League, anyone that is on the CFL's radar does jump out. There were a few games where I was watching for one particular guy, and it's almost like he's almost like appearing in like a different font or a different color, because the level of athleticism was evident. But there'd be someone else where I'm like, well, hang on a second, who's this guy? And every single time it turned out to be another guy that was on my list, another guy to look at. So in terms of seeing the talent, I don't think that's as hard. Now, the style of play, Arena League is really tough. I still have a really hard time with that, because you can tell if someone's a good athlete or not, but it is really tough to take an Arena League athlete, look at their film and say, yes, this guy will be a CFL star. It's just extremely difficult to do that. So in those cases, I'll try and go back and watch college film, something that is a little more easy to quantify.
The key is to have certain criteria that you're looking for from each position. I think that you have to move away from a kind of general, impression. What do your eyes tell you? And I think you need to get very specific with your criteria as to what do you want a corner? What are you looking for in a corner? What are you looking for in a defensive end? Or what sort of lateral movement are you looking for? What kind of quick get off? Quick get off is quick get off. Where whether you're in the NFL or the CFL or the XFL or MLS, if you have quick feet, if you have quick explosion, you're looking at that. If you're looking at the ability um, to process information, that becomes harder, because in terms of how hard are these leagues, that's where it really gets difficult. I think you are able to identify elite athleticism, but it's really difficult to know, can they understand a more complicated system? Are they able to adapt to that? Are they only good at one thing? Generally, the lower the league, the less sophisticated it is, and that's where you can't get to know their brain, which is where things break down so often.
The next question we have comes from Chris, who asks, concerning MLSE, there is a rumor persisting that they want to transform the CFL into an MLS style structure. I'd like to talk about that. So, pros and cons of an MLS type structure. This is something you know a lot more about than I do. What are the basic differences between the way that the MLS is set up and the CFL is set up?
So the MLS is basically set up without owners. You have investors who are stakeholders in the league. So when somebody takes a franchise, say like TFC, they are given the opportunity to run the franchise, but the league centrally controls the contracts. The league centrally controls all of the national television money, and in the MLS mode, also the transfer money for players coming from other leagues. So in essence, it's revenue sharing is probably the simplest way to put it. Is that each team is allowed some portion of their walk-up audience ticket money to keep and merchandise, but that there is a certain percentage, 40 to 50% of revenue that they have to give in centrally to the league. So in essence, they are all explicitly shareholders. I mean, in a sense, every league is that, but they're sort of competing with each other. In this sense, they are in every sense working together for the health of the league in terms of sharing their revenue and having budgets set centrally, and there being a lot more central control um, over profits.
I can think of 4 teams right away that would love this setup, and 5 teams that would be very skeptical of any kind of revenue sharing system. I'm drawn to it because MLS has worked, and I never thought it would to this degree. MLS is huge now in North America. It's a big thing. And if you had told me going back 25 years that a soccer league would have this kind of success and this kind of attention put on it in America and in Canada, I don't think I would have believed you, because I didn't think that was possible. And what they've done is just amazing. So I think anything you can take from the MLS and apply it, I think you should.
I think there are a couple of things that work here. I'm intrigued too. I think that, the teams in the CFL are sort of de facto doing this anyways. They know that they need each other to survive. So they're always kind of looking out for each other. I think what this would formalize is that no, we are going to try and be one entity that is going to make decisions that are good for everybody, and the individual revenues would reduce to some extent, but the health of the league, to me, I think the argument or the issue becomes, well, who's in charge and who gets to be the central voice of this league. That's a big change for those owners, but it makes sense to me. I think that it formalizes the need to work together. And, I know I'm going to sound like a Toronto guy, but, I mean, MLSE is a multi-billion-dollar organization. I think to pretend like they shouldn't ask MLSE for advice on how to run a sports league is outrageous. I think they should take advantage of the fact that this is not some random ownership. This is an organization that makes hundreds of millions of dollars running professional sports teams. And I'm sure from an MLSE perspective, they probably get really frustrated at what is not an optimal setup in the CFL, and wonder why are we doing it this way? This doesn't make any sense. This is some sort of 1940s model. Why are we not moving past this and coming up with something? And I think the MLSE has shown, or the MLS, sorry, not to conflate those. The MLS has shown this model works, and it works for a sport that nobody thought could survive in North America. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think they should.
This ties into our next question a little bit, which is a question from Will. He asks, and I think he knows the answer to this when he asks, but why is MLSE everyone's favorite scapegoat? For me, it's half of the things you just said. I think there's some jealousy. I think other teams, other cities, fans of other teams look at MLSE and they wish they had a multi-billion-dollar corporation at the head of their organization. I think that there's an anti-Toronto feeling that exists all across the country. And this is the owner of the Raptors, of the Leafs, of TFC, and of the Argos. And I think it's just a really easy thing for anyone on the outside, be distrustful and automatically hate, because they hate the Argos anyway. And so you're never going to like the Argos ownership, no matter who they are. But when it's a major corporation like that, it just makes it all that much easier. And so automatically they're scapegoat number one for anything.
Yeah, there's no doubt that people feel like they're getting big timed, or that they've been running a league that they love, and now the big shots from Toronto have got better ideas on how to run your team, Hick. I think all of those attitudes are legitimate. However, having said that, ever since Tim Leiweke, who, credit to MLSE, you want to talk about a big shot coming in. I mean, Tim Leiweke came and changed MLSE forever. And I think that the success of TFC and the Raptors and the Leafs in the last 5 years, 6 years, is all the evidence anybody needs to trust that there's probably some MLSE ideas that should be addressed, because they have been very, very successful using the blueprint that Tim Leiweke put down, and I think there are ways to go about it, but I understand, especially out west, people don't necessarily want to feel like Toronto is telling them how to run their league, but I mean, the league is taking on water.
Our last question comes to us from Robert, and he asked, if the lack of gate is holding things up, why don't teams sell fan cardboard cutout opportunities and other such things? I think they'd get a lot of support. It's an understanding fan base. I think there is something to that, but I think that there's a fear from the teams that this would not generate anywhere close to the type of revenue they're accustomed to getting from not only ticket sales, but also in-venue sales, from food sales and everything else that goes along with that, the advertising sales that are spent within the stadium. I think they would definitely make money. I think Robert's right that, yeah, they would sell. I think most of the CFL teams would sell a high number of cardboard cutouts. We've seen it work for other sports. It's a popular thing to do. It's really cheap to make. It's not that expensive to buy. It's cheaper than a ticket to buy. And so in that sense, yeah, I think it would bring in money. But like I said, it's cheaper than a ticket to buy, and you only do it once. You're not selling a cardboard cutout for $50 every time there's a game. And so it's really nowhere close at the end of the day. Now, could you go into other things? Are there other ways to make money? Yes. But they're things that just haven't really been done before. And there are things that are going to take some work, that are going to take some thought. And I think for owners, they would much rather depend on something that they know has worked before. Ticket sales, fans in seats. They know what that is. They know how to do that. They know it works. That's what they want. And cardboard cutouts, subscriptions, things like that, they are unproven. And I just don't think for them, who know they're going to lose money anyway, it's not worth the risk.
It's just not a revenue stream that's going to match. There's no way to simulate the income that the teams are getting from food, from alcohol, from parking, from ticket sales. Although the numbers are not astronomical, it still is a pretty steady revenue stream, and there's just no way to replace that. I don't think having fan events, selling things that are nice, as you put, but the revenue stream of ticket sales, and if that's the case, then they should just come out and say that running the league without fans in the stands is not viable, and so be it. But then I would like them to be transparent about that.
There are rumors of an announcement coming out in the next few days. We'll see if anything happens. We'll see if there is some direction, some official delay, some sort of schedule announcement. I'm not holding my breath, but I guess we'll be able to talk about that next week. That will just about do it for us on today's X's and Argos podcast. Again, I'll remind you to please subscribe, please rate, please tell everyone you know about us. For JB, my name is Ben Grant, saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.